We were just talking about you starting in television. As an actor coming from the stage, how did you have to accommodate yourself to television? Was, blocking and cameras, was there a real difference for you?
No, it's really the same, because blocking is like blocking on the set. And it wasn't like movies where you had the exact mark. The lighting was not that exact. So if you got in that area, more or less, you would be all right. It wasn't that exact. The most difficult things were running cross stage, changing while you were running. And as you get there, you're supposed to be very calm. When your heart is pounding and you're looking, you say yes. So you're indicating calmness. So it's a bad kind of acting, because you're indicating you're out of breath from running across the studio. But mostly, everything is rehearsals. I mean, time has got to be the friend of art. You only have one tool as an artist, and that's selectivity. That's all. That determines the degree of artistry within you. A man paints a painting, paints a line. The next day, he's constipated. His wife hollers at him. He makes the line a little sharper. And it's finally, after months, it's an accumulative thing of all of his moods, all of his expression, and has many dimensions. If you do television today, you don't have time. It's boom. And they do an imitation of I do all the time, of a director at Universal. Says, okay, action. Holy, where'd they get that guy? He's terrible. She's worse than he is. They're ruining it. They're ruining it. Cut. Print it. That was the director. Time and money. And so, we didn't have that. We had rehearsal time. We rehearsed for 6 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, with directors who knew what to do with the rehearsal time, because we all came from the theater. And you had people like Johnny, like Sidney Lumet, and Marty Ritt, and Yul Brynner. I mean, it was a great time. And Del Mann, oh God, it was exciting. Bob Mulligan was probably the best there. Chancy guy it was wonderful. It was a wonderful time. He directed Tony Perkins in a very big show called Joey, in which he was slightly retarded, and he was a dishwasher. And all weekend I was then wanting to learn how to direct, so I stayed with Bob as he went through. And all through the week, Tony had great behavior, but there was no spine to it. So I said, well, Bob, what are you doing? He said, I'll get him, don't worry about it. So 15 minutes before they went on the air live, 15 minutes, and the show was getting flat. He said to Tony, look, I'm going to give you an action to play. And if you believe, at any time that you believe this action, you can say this line. You can say, I can do it, but you got to believe it. So now he said, then he told the rest of the cast that if he says it, it's okay. He said, in other words, they pin his pay to it. They pin his paycheck or his payroll to him. He's supposed to say, I can carry it in my pocket, but you got to believe you can. So that now all this behavior came with when they started to pin it, and he wanted to say, but he didn't believe it. But now we saw the frustration and the need to want to be normal. It was most wonderful. Out of that, he got a contract at Paramount for 5, did a big movie called Fear Strikes Out, and became a big, big star. And I swear it was on that performance, and that performance was given to him 15 minutes before he went on the air. But look how chance he was. The guy could blow the whole show, but he didn't. He believed. He was a good man.
Well, at that time it seemed
he was a good man. He's not dead.
It seemed that all of you were so young. It was just this environment. What do you account for all this creativity that was there at that time?
Well, because we didn't start with that. We had been in television. We'd been making rounds. We'd been in summer stock. We'd learned how to work with characters. We'd learned how to use rehearsal. You know, we were doing Ibsen, and I may have been doing it badly, but I did Oscar Wilde. So we were stretching, and we were creative, and we were reading, and we were interested in the theater. We saw every play. We couldn't afford it. We second acted it. I saw Streetcar 17 times. 10 times I second acted it, 7 times I paid and saw the whole thing. It was inspiring for me. I learned from it. Every penny I could get, I went to Lee Strasberg's class, studied, observed, and we all did. We were all excited about it. There was no money in it. You know, you got $125 for a television show. that took for 3 or 4 days if you had over 5 lines. It wasn't, we were curious. We wanted to act, and we loved it. And here was an opportunity for us to act, so we did it.
How did you get work in television? What was the process of all of you going around getting work? Because I know you would have several shows at a time.
They get to know you, and word got around, and they would watch, everybody watched television, they'd call you. And I would act. I had no agent. In fact, when MCA called me to say they wanted to handle me, they said, we want to handle you because you're working too much. You're going to burn out before you become, you know, a commodity. They're going to be, you could be old before you knew. Because I was working. I told you, I did 3-hour shows live in less than 3 weeks. They gave you conflicts. They gave you $250 to do the show, so they would allow you conflicts. You'll keep it till 2 o'clock on Tuesday until 1 o'clock on Wednesday. Then they would say, okay, we'll take you 2 o'clock, and you would work it out. And I never had an agent, never got a job through an agent. All people calling me, doing craft, doing Studio Ones, and all that. And that's the way we all did it. I mean, a lot had agents. Paul Newman's in the Tony Frank shows had agents, but we didn't.
And one of the shows that you worked on was CBS Studio One, which I think you did a few as of, I think, 1955. Tell me about that show, because that was an interesting anthology. That was one of the best.
It was a wonderful show. It was really a wonderful show with a lot of class and tried to do things that had something to say. I, unfortunately, the first one here did a summer replacement, some cowboy show. It wasn't really very good because I was hardly a cowboy, but they took a chance. It had something to say. It really had a nice social message, and I liked that. And I had good acting. Mark Lawrence had some wonderful actors in it. And then the one I did, and went to California, you know, and they did it there. And I did one with Terry Moore there. It was a good show. They just got the best directors and the best. They were classy. There were shows that were classy. And but everybody tried their best, even though the lousy half-hour shows like Danger and stuff like that. They were on a level better than anything that's on television today. Because everybody was trying. We had the rehearsals to establish selectivity. We selected, we worked with each other. We all worked the same way. There was hunger, which I don't find today. There was curiosity, which I don't see today in most of the young actors. They go for the name, they go for the immediate job. You know, let's do David Letterman, let's get known, let's get fame. That was not the goal of my generation.
Right. Well, Herbert Brodkin was the producer, I believe, of Studio One at that time.
No, when I knew him as the producer only of Defenders. That's the first time I came in contact with him. And in fact, I did the show. It was the 4th show or so, but it was the first one they put on the air. And in many places, they thought that I was part of the series. And some even had, in the reviews, had my picture. And I loved that show. I love Reginald Rose. I mean, Reginald Rose is brilliant. He's another Rod Serling for me. I mean, he was wonderful, and integrity. You couldn't change lines or anything. There was really, he worked his butt off on that show. And, but Herb was giving $1,500 for top, whereas Naked City was giving $5,000. So I said, Herb, I can't do that for 15. It's not fair to Naked City. Jackie said, it's just for a year, so I could bring more television back to New York. Next year we'll raise it and we do other shows. So I did it, but he lied. He kept it $1,500. He did another show called Nurses, still $1,500 top, and everybody else started to bring their top down. And so, but they made a lot of that, like extra money at the end of the year, $250,000 extra, because of that cut. They didn't give it back to the actors; they put it in their pockets. Not nice, but he did good work. I can't take that away from him. He was good and courageous. That's a good show.
Yeah, and we'll get to Defenders a little bit later. But I know we mentioned some of the amazing directors that you worked with, and let's just touch a little bit on them and what they meant to the industry. For instance, Sidney Lumet, working with him.
Sidney Lumet was probably, for me anyway, at that time, next to Mulligan, he and Mulligan were the best. And it's Sidney's love for it. If you watched him as he directed, just had to look at him. He would go with you. He was with you. I was in front of the Yiddish theater. And if you were sad, He would be sad if you were happy, and he'd live it with you, and he wanted you to be so good, and he invested all that he had and everything he did. In fact, so much so that the one I played the 75-year-old man, it made me look bad. I did the show in which I had to cry because I didn't have to cry, but I ended up crying because Ralph Bellamy had betrayed me, and I loved him. And I came home, and my wife said, "What the hell did you do?" I said, "What?" She said, "The crying scene." I said, "Wasn't it great?" She said, "Don't you know where the camera was?" I never know. She said, "The camera was right here." So that when I cried, the distortion, because it was right here, was ugly, and, people were recoiling. So, but it was his love of that pure emotion. He wanted to capture it, and it kind of backfired at that time. But to work with him, Fritz Asher, the kind of guy he was. In that particular piece, he wanted me to play a foreman. I said, "Oh, I played foreman. I don't want to play that part." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" "I'd like to do the accountant, that 75-year-old man." He said, "You think you can do it?" I said, "Yeah, you got it." I mean, that's courageous, man. He was wonderful. He was my favorite.
George Roy Hill was somebody you'd worked with as an actor.
As an actor. I never worked with him as a director.
Really?
As an actor, I worked with him. And I remember when, in fact, the day he'd come from J. Walter Thompson, which put on Kraft. He was sort of exclusive with them. They had made him, he had a promise that he would give up acting. Not pursue acting anymore so that he could be a director. They didn't want anybody that they were going to school and then would go away and then go back to acting. So he said, okay, and they nursed him, and he turned out to be a giant. Wonderful day. It was wonderful. You feel like, if you live long enough in this business, people like Johnny Kander, who wrote the Cabaret in Chicago. When I did Gypsy, he was sort of a helper. He was the one that I went to with. He was on the show, and he taught me how to sing a song, Small World. I'd go to his place, and he would teach me. The most wonderful, the sweetest kid in the world. He said, well, that's what he'll always be. Became this giant of a talent, which he always had. Those are wonderful things to see. The guy played the piano for me when I auditioned. I gave him $5. A kid. Name was Billy Goldenberg. Now a great composer, a great conductor. I mean, it's so wonderful,
What year was Gypsy that you appeared?
Gypsy was 59.
Yeah, and that was with Ethel Merman.
Yes.
That was the original. Tell me about working with her on that.
Oh, I loved her. She was wonderful. We had truly a platonic love affair for years and years afterwards as well. We just loved each other. I loved her, and I would sit there. I was a sing too. She would sing to me, and I would just sit there. When come up, she'd say, "Did you paint again?" And I said, "No, but I got the best seat in the house, honey." And I just loved to listen to her sing, and I'd sit there like smiling. It was a good experience. I worked with Jerome Robbins, probably the only real genius I ever worked with, and Sandra Church. It was a wonderful experience. Arthur Lawrence and Julie Stein and Stephen Sondheim. I mean, I was there the day they came in with her aria at the end. We were rehearsing at the Amsterdam Theater, which is now where Lion King is. And she kept saying, where's my big song? And they came in. Julie Stein and Stephen Sondheim. Julie played the piano and Stephen sang it. And Ethel was brilliant in it, but she'll never sing it the way Stephen sang it that day. It was so brilliant, so moving. I was there. I mean, it was a historical day. I've had a rich life.
It's wonderful. Well, I want to take you back and talk about John Frankenheimer, who is also another director that you've worked with. Tell me about working with him.
Oh, well, I think Johnny he was brilliant. He's another guy, technically. He flooded the studio to do the Falklands Gilman. Flooded the studio, it almost collapsed. Flooded with water and put a rowboat on it. He would do things with cameras that nobody could do in a limited studio. Miniatures. And I watched a scene where it was a mob scene where they were all picking up sticks and stuff to go to kill a person that was either was a black family or something they wanted to do harm to. And so he had these guys picking up these sticks, hundreds of sticks. There were about 14 people. So as they were going in, he kind of went in on them sticks. Now these same people kept taking sticks and looking like he had 400 people grabbing him, and then he pulled back. It was so smooth. I was so impressed with the way he did it. He did more with little than anybody. Knew his cameras and loved actors. He was a little impatient at times, but he was really a joy to work with.
Did you work with Fielder Cook at all?
I think I did. I don't remember. I don't know. I know there was I had one experience with him. He was going to do a remake of Lost Weekend. And he had Jack Lemmon, he said. And I was going to play the male nurse, which is one day. It was a very small part. But with Jack Lemmon, it's not a small part, because he's so big star and brilliant guy. So then they called me and they said they couldn't get him. They got somebody else. Much less a nice, good actor, but not the name. So I said, no, I don't want to do the part. But I said, no. With Jack Lemmon, it's a cameo. With this guy, it's a small part. I said, I haven't worked all this time. Well, he got so angry with me. And his representative, and I said, go to hell, I don't care. What do I care if Fielder Cook is mad at me? What does that mean? I didn't care if Josh Logan was mad at me. I don't care what he's, because Josh Logan wanted to be caught the next year in Mr. Roberts as the doctor. And I said, I already did it with Henry Fonda, the best. Why should I go out? So his representative, I think it was Billy Hammerstein, said, boy, Josh is mad. What the hell do I care if he's mad? Do I have to make my decisions based on whether Josh Logan is angry? I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I lost the job as a result.
Well, Delbert Mann was also a great director at that time.
Yes, yes. Oh.
Tell me about working with him.
Del was just first the most patient, most giving, very knowledgeable. Worked slowly. I mean, when we did Petrified Forest, very slowly. And it just was a pleasure to go to work. It was just, he created a wonderful atmosphere. And that was the great experience. Oh, to work with those people.
And you mentioned, I know you worked with Yul Brynner, who
he directed me in 1947 or 8, I think, very early on television, in a show called The Actors Studio. Now, he directed the actors, and Alex Siegel, who went on to become an award-winning director, great director, did the camera work. And Yul Brynner was funny. Marty Ritt tells a funny story about him. He was more a hanger-on. He owed a lot of people money, and he was a nice guy, but he was not really respected that much as a performer. And then The King and I came along, and of course he was so brilliant in it. And in Philadelphia, before they came in, the news had gotten around how wonderful he was, and Marty Ritt and Alex March went to see him, two of very dear old friends of his. And he had a dresser, an enormous 6'4" beautiful black gentleman with a shaved head was his dresser. So they knocked at the door, and the dresser opened the door, a very strange man. And Alex and then Marty looked at this guy, said, Mr. Brynner will be with you in a moment. And it went on. Now, the dresser went out. And they said, when did you get this guy? And Yul Brynner said, he's always been with me. Which means no more talk about failure, no more talk about the old days, I am a star. But it's a wonderful way to put it. He's always been with me. So I love that story.
Well, you just mentioned Martin Ritt, and put him in perspective for us of what
Marty Ritt, I've been blacklisted a long time, so I did a lot of theater with Marty. Summer Stock, we did, and a play on Broadway. I did Detective Story with him, John Barrett Gray. I did Golden Boy with Leo Penn, Sean Penn's father. Then on Broadway, we did A Very Special Baby with Sylvia Sidney, whom I still adore. At 88, she's the best. And Luther Adler, wonderful actor, the Marlon Brando of his day. And Jack Warden. What was a hell of a cast. And we did it, and Marty directed, and I thought he did a lousy job of directing it. We later made a Playhouse 90 out of it. Bob Arthur did, the author. And I played Robert Allen Arthur. I played the playwright. And there was a scene that I had with the director, who was James Mason. Played Marty Ritt. What a stretch that was. And I really nailed him in the scene. Wasn't written that way, but I really nailed him. And Robert Arthur came and said, Jack, you know, you're nailing him. I said, Bob, we know what really happened, and you really wrote it that way, and you were angry with him, and you should be angry with him, and he did goof it up. And I said, I'm not changing it, and I really let him have it. I loved it. James Mason was wonderful. He was so scared, because he'd only done film. I was scared doing film, but live I had done so many. At dress rehearsal, it was over, he said, are you going to be that arrogant on the air, you bastard? I said, well, I'm scared, Jim, when I do, you know, film, but live. He said to me, there's only one other person that ever called me Jim. He came in a couple days, he said, I remember who it was, me mom.
Yeah, how did film actors regard live television?
Scared to death. Scared to death. Unbelievable, no matter what it was. Yeah, amazing. And former theater people. Like Edmund O'Brien, I used to be Red Skelton's straight man. I did about 6 shows for him. I was the head straight man. And Edmund O'Brien was a guest, wonderful actor. But scared. These guys would get scared. To me, that was a breeze. I get in front of a camera. I would when I did 12 Angry Men, I have a scene where I talk about the dagger. I was quivering so much. You say camera doesn't lie. It's a lie. It's not true. If it showed how wow I really felt, you'd have seen panic. But it wasn't. And Fonda was looking at me like, what's the matter with you? Because on stage I was so free, but in front of that camera, even today.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm just scared. It's foreign to me. It's like Big Brother's watching me or something. I don't know what the hell it is.
Well, you mentioned 12 Angry Men. That was in 1957. That's a feature film.
Well, that's when it came out.
Yeah.
But we did it in '56. Yeah.
Well, tell me how you were hired to do that.
That's what I said. I was too young. I was too old for the part. But Henry Fonda got me the part. Now I know. And that's the best picture I ever made. That was the most fun I ever had making a movie. We couldn't wait to go to rehearsal. We rehearsed for 2 weeks. Couldn't wait. Every day of that shoot, everybody was there. There was never a day of the 4 weeks of shooting that one of the 12 people were not there. We were all there off camera for the other person. Everybody. It was a labor of love like I've never seen. You laughed every day. You listened to stories from Lee Cobb, from Ed Begley. Oh, it was wonderful. Ed Begley come all the time. He'd have a young girl with him. It was his niece. Your niece? How many nieces you have? As many as I need. Oh, I love this man. Yeah, it was great people. Joe Sweeney. What an actor.
And Reginald Rose wrote the script. Was he there?
Sure, Reggie was the producer. He didn't take any money. They did that picture for $500,000. And it never got its money back until they made it into a play called 12 Angry Women. And it was done at all these PTA meetings and community theaters. And then Reggie started to make some money. Now it became a successful play. And in fact, Tony and I are thinking about doing it.
Oh, you are?
Here at the National Actors Theater next year.
Oh, so this will be a feature for next year?
Yeah, we're thinking about it.
That's great. Well, I'm going to take you back to television because I want to talk about craft television for a couple reasons, because you acted in...
Did a lot of crafts. I wrote a couple of shows.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about that. You wrote The Big Break in, what, 1957?
Was it then? I don't know. I think it was 56.
One probably appeared maybe on...
Yeah, I think it was 56. I don't know. Yeah. I wrote a show. I'll tell you how it happened. I was with an analyst, and he was teaching me to know my worth. And I was always getting $450 every time I did a craft. I did a lot of crafts. The top of the show was $750. So one day I determined that I wanted top of the show. So the agent called me and said they wanted me for the show, and I said, she said $450. I said, no, I want $750. She said, they won't give it to you. I said, well, then I'm worth $750. That's what I think. So she came back and said, they said, no. I said, okay. I said, I want to sit down on the morning that they're supposed to go to rehearsal. And by 10 o'clock Wednesday night, the following 10 days later, I will write a script. I will have a script finished. And I sat down and I finished it then. And I sold it to them for $2,750. And it starred everybody, James Barton and Zazu Pitts, Frank McHugh, cast. Cliff Robertson played the lead. And it was a fun thing.
Explain what that was like to actually see the things you'd written on television.
Well, I was primarily an actor, so when I went on the air live, I had gone to do Gunsmoke. So I was in California. And I had said to the director, Paul Bogart, don't make this a showbiz script. This is about any man who's put 50 years of love into something shouldn't be discarded. But don't make it showbiz, because then it makes it special. Now I'm out there, I finished Gunsmoke, they take me in a limo to NBC, into a special room, and I'm looking at the television set, and it opens, the booth, and the clock, 9, 8, 7, it's all show business, and I knew, and I got so mad. I threw a chair at the set, I was so mad that they made it a show business kind of story, which it really wasn't. And I wasn't too happy with it. It wasn't that well written, but it was better written than it was done. And so I really have no, just didn't care for it that much.
Had you always had aspirations to write?
No, it just, I was writing and I just thought, well, that's what I'll do. I had no way to get back at craft, so that's what I did.
You ended up writing another one, too.
So then they said, I had written something earlier that I had in the closet called Code of the Corner. And they said, I said, well, I have another story, and I gave it to them. They bought it right away, and it starred Walter Matthau. Walter came in the first day's rehearsal, and I'd known Walter many years. We played poker 50 years ago. So he came in and he handed me a wad of money. He said, hold this for me, will you? Now when they rehearsed in the morning, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, one of these guys comes in, he said, let me have the money. It was $10,000. I'm talking about 1956. And he gave 10 grand to this guy. Walter, 10 grand, he said, if I don't come up with the rest, they'll kill me. He owed him a lot of money. He just was again about what an actor. He was so wonderful. Oh.
Had you worked with him on stage before that?
No, but I'd known, I played poker with him and I knew him socially.
Well, we talked about some of the directors. I want to talk about some of the writers that you were associated with in that golden time of television. Did you ever work with Paddy Chayefsky?
No, that was one of my dreams, no. Just admired him and admired his work. I know Herb Gardner, who wrote Rappaport, who's a dear friend of mine. He and Bob Fosse and Paddy shared an office, and they helped each other. If one had to play out of town, the other would take a week or so. Others would go out there and help. They all help one another. Imagine that trio of talent. And I would hear wonderful stories Herb would tell. I think Herb is the best playwright we have in America. And the Rappaport is still the best fun I've ever had doing a play. And I was the third replacement. I loved that play, loved him. And I loved Thousand Clowns. I just think he's wonderful. I don't know what else.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and then we'll change tapes.
Okay.
Perfect.